Welcome to another episode of Inspired Content. Starting off a whole nother month with a book, and the book this month is Spelljammer Beyond the Moons. The Cloakmaster Cycle #1. I'll see how that goes, and I'll see you on the other side for thoughts and inspirations. I would have to say right off the bat, and I give this about a 5.4 out of a 6.1. The feel of this story was very much like a role-playing game, I guess. The main characters are the most fleshed out, and all the people that they encounter along the way are meant to facilitate the story and the adventure, and there's not usually a further depth to them. Where you get some of the aspects of character depth, it's only in as far as it helps elaborate the narrative of the main character. A lot of the story, the early part of the story was a little bit of a draw to get through. It took a while to get into it. It was always just kind of like, in the hero's arc storylines you tend to see, there's the call to adventure and the refusal of that adventure, and then the no option but to take that adventure. And it seems like the first 2/3 of this book are him just trying to refuse the adventure. And it's an unfortunate approach. It's hard. It's hard to say that this is a little rough as a story because it's volume 1 in a 5-volume set, and it looks like each volume is written by a different author. So I feel like if it was planned out all beforehand, then this isn't so much an entire self-contained story with character growth arcs as it is the pilot episode of a series. So, I mean, I gotta give it a little leeway on that front, I think. But all in all, it's still got some aspects of a decent adventure. And it's got some ideas that I think, when fleshed out into a full-blown story by themselves, would be worth exploring. So, alright, moving into the ideas and inspirations. I kinda want to take the idea in a slightly different direction, starting out with an idea of like a captain of a ship whose crew mutinies and wants to become pirates, and perhaps it's being done because the captain has been charged with the responsibility of transporting a powerful artifact, and captain manages to crash the ship to try to take out any of the mutineers and escape, but in doing so is mortally wounded, and as the captain is fleeing, he tries to take to a hiding place with a civilian, and in case he gets captured, he wants to be separated from the item, but while he's separated from the artifact, he dies, or she dies, but the civilian is left with the artifact and a vague notion of what it is, but not what it does. It knows that people are out after it, and knows that it needs to be destroyed, but doesn't know how, or destroyed, gotten rid of, whatever they have to do to it. And so the civilian is stuck with the responsibility of handling this, and the mutineers find the civilian with the item, and it's a chase. And it's one of those things where the item itself is dangerous in anybody's hands, and so you can't let anybody else have it, and you can't just bury it because they'll find it. Just a risk of somebody finding it is too dangerous, and you can't let the pirates get it. So this person has the responsibility of trying to do something with this thing, and they're trying to escape with it. Now, what the artifact does affects the story. My mind says that an artifact with, like some people have said things like the crystal skulls were storers of ancient knowledge, and you can learn the lifetime's worth of knowledge of previous people who have stored their lifetime knowledge inside these artifacts. So something like that might be kind of a worthy object where you could learn the ancient secrets of lost civilizations, and you can store your own memories in it, the memories of the captain are in it. All those things are potential risks that you just can't let fall into the wrong hands. But I got to wondering about maybe having a mad scientist sidekick character who's only along for the journey to gather notes and observations on the test subject using an object that they're stuck to or stuck with. So, like, you could have somebody who puts their fist in a gauntlet and they can't get their fist out of the gauntlet, but it bestows on them a certain amount of command or power. And so you have this mad scientist, very interesting, taking notes all the while, and will not be separated from the guy with the gauntlet and constantly wants to be there to observe it. And so when the guy with the gauntlet gets into a situation that's not going well, the mad scientist is going to be there with mad scientist gadgets to end up being a sidekick and a helping ally, but not because he cares about the person, just because he wants his field notes, he wants to see what's happening, he wants to know what's happening, and he doesn't want to lose the item. So that's the only reason he's there. Yeah, slaves on a slave ship suddenly set free during a combat or a crash of some kind, and they sort of wash up on an island full of strange beings. Sort of like in the stories of the Odyssey, you have these strange islands that they end up on, and each one has something going on in the background. And I wonder what would happen if you had a group of people who were not a group of people, but just enslaved people who were on this ship. Ship crashes on an island full of mystical, strange beings. They never wanted to be there. They don't have a group identity. The only thing they have in common is that they were bought and sold and being transported. And so it's Lost, and it's the Odyssey, and it's a prisoner escape kind of thing, all kind of rolled into one. This is sort of a retro science fiction where very Flash Gordon-y or Buck Rogers, but do it within the solar system. You have your Martians, and your Venus is a jungle planet kind of setting, but instead of doing the traditional things, have the planets within the solar system inhabited by fantasy races. And so it's a mashup of elves and dwarves on rocket ships. It's sort of like taking urban fantasy and going retro sci-fi with it. A fantasy setting where there is an alchemical class of magic users that use pyrotechnics and gunpowder. Because it seems to me like there's the idea of like taking fantasy settings and throwing revolvers and guns in it, and that's one thing. What I'm looking more towards is, to be perfectly honest, and they cover this early in the Beyond the Moons book, is the main character is a character in a completely fantasy setting, and he encounters a gun, a flintlock pistol essentially. And the author rightly makes that seem like essentially not that different from a magic wand that shoots fireballs or something like that. And so with that same mindset, the idea of fireworks and gunpowder and guns, cannons and bullets and those kinds of things, I feel like taking the real science of those things and throwing it into the middle of a fantasy type of setting, it would logically be assumed that it is a type of magic. And so to have characters focused on that type of magic and using that type of magic as their specialty, just as somebody who could do illusions would have a specialty. And so there's a part of me that wants to make a setting where all the magics are completely explainable using things we know now, but it seems like magic to them, and write it as magic, but it's the magic of gunpowder, you know. This one is kind of what I felt like at certain points this was trying to do, but they just kept cutting it off before they did this, was a nobody character with no talents and no skills, going nowhere in their life, nothing important about them, but they end up with something that makes them extremely important to a villainous character or group. And that villainous character is one of those manipulate from the background kind of characters. And they hire up crews of dangerous people to do the dirty work for them. And in doing this, the crews, time after time, fail to catch the character. And in failing to catch them, the people who are trying to catch him end up under threat of punishment by the people who set him out to do it. So like, you'd have a character who gets a bowling ball, whatever. The item doesn't matter, and the guy who wants this bowling ball is willing to send out hitmen and assassins and robbers and anarchists and con men to try to get it. And you get a group of hitmen who go out to try to get this bowling ball, and for whatever reason they fail at this job, and the guy who wants the bowling ball back is so angry at them for not being able to do that that he kills some of the members of the hitmen. And so the ones that survive and escape from being killed for their failure end up having to work with the guy who has the bowling ball, working together so that they can protect each other from the mutual enemy. And so you end up with this unintentional, accidental allies in a group on a quest with a character who has no importance other than the fact that he has this item that they all were supposed to try to get from him. And now it's sort of like the villain is building an army against himself just by the way he's behaving towards the people he hired to do this. Alright, that's an awful lot to go through. Hopefully there's some inspiration or ideas in there for you to work with. I know I have a couple ideas I want to chase down on some of these. So I will see you for the next episode. Take care.